Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Plant Powered Dog Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Robert Silver to the podcast. For those of you who don't know Dr. Silver, you're in for a great treat, as he's been a leader in the field of integrative veterinary medicine for more than 40 years, even though he doesn't look that old. So, Dr. Silver
Like just
began
a
his
day.
journey. Dr. Silver began his journey as a graduate of Colorado State University's College of Veterinary Medicine in 1982. In 1993, he established one of the first holistic and integrative veterinary practices in the United States, known as Boulder's Natural Animal. This practice still serves as a model that is followed by current integrative veterinary practices. In 1994, Dr. Silver was invited to become the Chief Medical Officer for the popular supplement brand RX Vitamins for Pets, for which he developed 40 unique and innovative veterinary nutraceutical formulations. After retiring from clinical practice in 2013, Dr. Silver established the Well-Pet Dispensary, which offers hard-to-find nutraceuticals, herbs, and cannabinoid therapeutics for dogs and cats. He is also currently the Chief Veterinary Officer for Real Mushrooms, a brand that I really love, a medicinal mushroom company for people and companion animals. He travels extensively, providing continuing education and postgraduate classes in integrative medicine to veterinarians around the world. So, Dr. Silver, you're a very busy man. So, thank you
Seems that
so
way.
much. Yeah, see, doesn't it when you hear it?
Yeah.
So,
I'm really happy to be here with you today, Diana, and I really appreciate your sending me a copy of your book because I just found it fascinating. And I
thank you so
really
much.
appreciated your attention to detail in terms of spelling things out precisely, for the pet
Thank
parent.
you.
It's a good book. It
Thank
should
you
be
very much.
it should be on every person's shelf, even if they're not going to be feeding a vegan diet to their.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Right. Thank you so much. Your opinion means so much to me. And yes, you made my week. So
It's a good
thank
book.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, you're an expert in lots of things, but a couple of things that have been particularly popular over the last few years with pet parents, um, and that is medicinal mushrooms and CBD products.
Hmm.
So we're going to talk a lot about that today. But first, I just want, for those listeners who are a bit unsure about what you practice and what integrative veterinary medicine is, and
Hmm.
could you elaborate a bit on that and how you get
Yeah,
into
well,
that?
absolutely, sure. There's a lot of ways to address um, health and disease in people and in pets. And we have a system of medicine called conventional medicine that's based on science and based on the use of drugs and surgery and some diet, but mostly drugs and surgery and certainly for conditions that need that. We're glad we've got that. But there are other ways to help enhance the body's healing process. And these may be certain types of diets or foods, like we could probably speak highly about the value of vegan diets in terms of reducing inflammation and things like that. But these are also things like mushrooms. These are also things like plant medicine. These are also things like acupuncture. These are also things just like stress relief and biofeedback. These are all things which are not very well addressed by conventional medicine, but for which there's a great deal of knowledge and evidence that they can help people and can help pets. So my definition of integrative medicine is we take the best of conventional medicine and blend it with the best of alternative medicine for which there's good evidence that would be specifically appropriate for that single patient. Because one of the failings, I think, in conventional medicine is they treat patients like a diagnosis instead of looking at the patient specifically. And integrative medicine, holistic medicine, they take each patient as an individual. They look at its lifestyle, they look at its emotional context and environment, all sorts of different things, including the physical examination. And so that's really what I do, because I don't think you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think conventional medicine's great. I think the complaints people have about conventional medicine is because sometimes that's the only thing they're using, or or they're using it in too aggressive a fashion. And oftentimes the dosages they use for drugs could be lower depending on the individual. So that's what I do. And I graduated from CSU in 1982 thinking that I knew everything I needed to know to do battle with all the diseases of the pets out there in the world. And a couple of years out, I realized there's some of these diseases, problems with cancer and diabetes and Cushing's disease and epilepsy, for which the drugs that we have or the solutions that we have in conventional medicine just aren't that good. They're okay, but they aren't that good. And some of them have side effects. So I've been searching ever since 5 years out of vet school for new tools. And I started with the plant kingdom because as a backpacker, I used to learn, I learned how to identify edible plants and medicinal plants and poisonous plants so I could, kind of survive that way. So I had a great deal of interest in plants and realized that some plants could be not just nutritive, but could also be very healing. And then from there, I learned acupuncture and then adapted Chinese medicine to my interest in herbs. So learned Chinese herbs, just learned about homeopathy. I personally don't resonate as much with homeopathy as other people do, and then started learning about nutraceuticals, about vitamins and minerals and extracts of plants. And that naturally brought me to cannabis. Around 2000, I'm in Colorado, we legalized medicinal marijuana. We'd like to call it cannabis now. And I started getting clients coming in with pets that they were giving it to their pets. And so I learned a lot. I learned about the difficulty dogs have with THC. Once CBD started being marketed, I started seeing really good benefits with that. So I was so fascinated by it, and I'm a bit of a nerd, that I learned enough about it. I worked for a hemp grower in Colorado, at the time it was one of the largest in the country. And I learned all about growing and manufacturing and extracting and making into products, and got some funding to do some studies. And then I started incorporating CBD in my knowledge base to help pets. And then about 8 years ago, pretty much almost at the same time that CBD became dominant, we started seeing better products in the marketplace that would contain medicinal mushrooms, primarily from the company that I'm now working for, Real Mushrooms. Real Mushrooms is a Canadian company, and their parent company is called Namex. And Namex has been around for 40 years. And they actually cultivate these mushrooms under USDA organic standards. And they're very clean, they're very pure. They analyze them all. I think I wrote a blog for you that has the analyses of their extracted products in terms of protein and fiber and things like that. So if people wanted to formulate a diet using these, they could add them in and see how how well they work within that formula. Um, and so now we've got really good medicinal mushrooms, and we even have a few studies as well. So my interest is, yes, it's in mushrooms and cannabis, but those are also one reason I'm interested in those is because they're so cool, and because the parents are so interested in them now, that it actually provides me with a platform to attract pet parents to my teachings, where I can actually teach them about all the other things that are also really good quality home prepared meals, supplements to the food, wellness components, things that build health and immunity on a daily basis that aren't drugs, foods and nutraceuticals. So that's a long-winded answer to you, but that's kind of how I came to it.
It's fascinating. I would think that back then, it was not as popular as it is now. And did you receive any sort of pushback from the veterinary community,
Oh
or
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I'm the hippie vet. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at what vets see every day in their exam room, whether it's mushrooms or whether it's CBD. They see dogs coming in, they got a little bit of their owner's edible and they're having a neurologic crisis from the THC. If it's in the daytime, they'll bring them to the regular vet. If it's nighttime, they'll take them to the ER. And then they've got dogs that after a rainfall, they go out in the backyard and they eat some mushrooms that come up that are very toxic. So that's what veterinarians have seen with marijuana is the THC overdoses, and the mushroom poisoning. So they started already not having a good attitude about it. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I was doing with RX vitamins for CBD, and what I'm doing with real mushrooms for mushrooms is I'm reaching out and speaking to veterinarians at conferences and giving them the science and giving them the information and giving them the safety information so they know better how to use it. I'm leaving Thursday of this week. I do travel a lot to speak. I'm going to Virginia where we have the International Veterinary Acupuncture Conference, and I'm going to be speaking about the traditional Chinese medicine aspects of medicinal mushrooms to all of these veterinary acupuncturists. So that's pretty cool. A little later next month, I'll be going to Texas to speak at the Hospice and Palliative Care Conference about the value of CBD for hospice and the value of mushrooms for hospice care. So, it keeps going. Then I'm going to be at the Holistic Conference in October, and back down in Texas at the end of September, doing a lunch and learn there at the Southwest Veterinary Symposium. So I'm out there, and I've already spoken 3 or 4 times to vets this year up till now. So really getting out there a lot to try to educate the vets and let them see that mushrooms can be a good partner for them in their practice. They're very safe. They're non-toxic, and they have a very good effect, but they are foods, but we like to call them superfoods because they don't just provide nutrition, they provide other health benefits. And the benefits of mushrooms are best if they're taken every day, if they're part of the diet, because if you just use them for a couple of days, they may have a short-term effect, but their benefit is so much better when they're taken on a daily basis, months and months and months. There's something that we're learning now with medicinal mushrooms, that when you give them regularly, it does something called train the immune system. And it actually turns the immune system into a more vigilant system to be able to detect challenges more quickly and be more effective with resolving them. And in fact, once the immune system's trained, you could even, which might take a month or 2, you could even not necessarily have the mushrooms every day because the effect becomes longer lasting. So some people talk about pulsing their therapy, like they want to maybe, do it 3 days a week off and 2 days a week or 4 days a week on or something like that. So you could very much, for myself, I take so many supplements, I get kind of tired of them. So usually I give myself a break over the weekend and I don't do my stretching and I just, I have my weekend. So, so by the fact that the long-term effects are more durable, if you miss a day or you go away or you run out, you forgot to reorder that bottle, don't sweat it. It'll be okay. Just wait till the bottle comes in and resume the therapy.
So you're saying that mushrooms sound like they're adaptogenic, that
they are considered to be adaptogens, but there's a new definition of adaptogen that only defines 2 mushrooms as being true adaptogens. Adaptogens, adaptogens are herbs, plants, and mushrooms which help the body deal with stress. And that was the original definition of it. And the stress organ in the body is the adrenal glands. But we now know, back from when they originally defined adaptogens, we now understand endocrinology better. We understand that the adrenal glands don't live alone, in the small of your back, that they communicate continually with the pituitary and the glands that are in the brain, and they go back and forth with their releasing hormones and their stimulating hormones and the biofeedback within the body. So true adaptogens will affect that axis between the pituitary and the adrenal gland. And there's 2 mushrooms that do that. Reishi, the Reishi Ganoderma lucidum, which they call the mushroom of immortality, and is probably the most famous mushroom. It's been around for thousands of years. It was much revered by the ancient Chinese. They would, if the peasants would find a beautiful specimen, sometimes they can grow this large, they would take it to the emperor as a offering, as a gift, which would bestow great honor upon themselves, but it's thought would bestow immortality, long life and health upon the emperor. The other mushroom is the caterpillar mushroom, cordyceps. There recently was a Netflix horror film about the cordyceps mushroom, which is a little bit of myth there. But the cordyceps mushroom, which is a relative of truffles and morels, which makes it the tastiest of all the mushroom extracts. But the cordyceps mushroom, the spores will infect like an ant or a caterpillar, and they'll grow all the way through the caterpillar or ant, and then kill it. And then when conditions are right, it sends up little mushroom fruiting bodies out of the caterpillars. Some of the photos are pretty
Oh my
amazing.
goodness.
And if it infects an ant, what's really cool, and there's some videos on YouTube of this, it'll overtake the ant's nervous system and cause the ant to climb to the top of a bush, and with its jaws clamp onto a leaf at the very, very top of the bush, and then it dies with its clamped to that leaf, and it releases all the spores. The higher the spores are to be released, the better they're dispersed by the wind. That's one reason mushrooms have stalks. Not all mushrooms have stalks, but that's why mushrooms that have stalks, because they get them up off the ground, so when the wind comes, it can blow the spores, and they can then settle and grow elsewhere. We also have mushrooms that grow on trees. They don't need stalks because they're actually high up already on the tree. They release their spores and they just go spread widely. It's interesting how nature takes care of itself, isn't it?
So they're very intelligent.
Well, I think intelligence is something that we need to maybe redefine. It may not necessarily be cognition when it comes to intelligence. So it's fast, but yeah, there does seem to be some innate intelligence, something that drives them. Maybe just the whole survival thing, becomes a form of intelligence. You're intelligent if you survive,
Right. So it sounds like medicinal mushrooms can address a lot of different aspects of health because they are anti-inflammatory, they can be adaptogenic.
Yes.
But are there any particular health issues in dogs that you find that medicinal mushrooms are, particularly good at addressing?
Well, when you think about the cordyceps, having an impact on the adrenal glands and the pituitary, you think maybe that might be good for Addison's, or for Cushing's disease, both, because it doesn't necessarily make the adrenal glands work harder, it just makes them work better. So that would be one thing that I would consider. Reishi, the hormones it works with, does work with the adrenal hormones, but we also know that it works a lot with the gonadal hormones. So both reishi and cordyceps are known to help with fertility, for instance, and cordyceps is known to increase testosterone levels. So for many years, it still is, the wild cordyceps was revered in Asian culture as a aphrodisiac because of its influence on testosterone, and it's wildcrafted. They have to actually crawl along the ground and find these little mushrooms coming out of the buried caterpillars, and so the cordyceps that's wild fetches like $15,000 a kilogram, whereas extract, the bulk extract of cordyceps that is sold by the parent company of real mushrooms is like $250 a kilo. So there are a number of conditions. For instance, reishi, just talking about these two to begin with, reishi extract is used by Zen masters as a meditation aid. And so we know that many people will take reishi at night to calm them down. We have dogs with anxiety. I've just participated in this pet anxiety summit, and that's one of the things I'm talking about, is how reishi can help help reduce stress by its effect on the brain. But interestingly enough, reishi also has antihistaminic properties. So if you're looking at a dog with allergies, we know that the beta, and there's mushrooms are complicated. There's lots of individual ingredients in them, each of which has its special activity. This fibrous cell wall of the mushroom is made up of beta glucans and chitin. Chitin's a precursor for glucosamine, so very strong fiber, and the beta glucans and chitin in the mushroom cell wall function as prebiotics. They feed the microbiome. And so this is also one reason why it's really important to cook the mushrooms. Where everyone's so big on raw diets, but not everything should be raw.
Right.
Mushrooms, because they're so fibrous, need to be cooked in order to break down that fibrous wall to release the beta glucans, which are what train the immune system, and release the chitin, which helps to feed the microbiome. And actually, the chitin is a precursor for N-acetyl D-glucosamine, which perhaps you're familiar with, is a form of glucosamine that we find in the bowel that helps to support the integrity of the connective tissue. So we've got a few studies that show that the use of N-acetyl D-glucosamine helps with inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome. So we've got all this great fiber in all the mushrooms. Any mushroom will give you that. Will give you the beta glucans. But reishi and another mushroom called chaga, they have these terpenes in them, which have antihistaminic properties, but they also have the beta glucans. So the beta glucans help to balance the immune system. When you have allergies, you start reacting to things that as though things are threatening to your body that they aren't. Some people with allergies, you'd think that pollen was toxic. They have such a reaction to it. So the beta glucans help to re-educate the immune system, because the beta glucans bind to the immune cells in the body and helps to regulate immune cell activity. So mushrooms are a natural partner with your allergic pet, although there are a few pets and a few people that are allergic to mushrooms, primarily the spores. There's always, it's always going to be somebody allergic to something. So, so reishi and chaga are very good mushrooms for allergies. Also good for cancer. Chaga's maybe you've seen chaga. It looks like it's a canker that grows on the bark of a birch tree.
Oh, yes.
So it's not really a mushroom. It's actually a canker mycelium growing into the wood, but it grows at the northern latitudes. Like we find it in Finland and Norway and Siberia and Russia and Canada, and so the native peoples have seen that growing for millennia. And in terms of the native peoples' understanding of medicine, they have something called the doctrine of signatures, or like cures like. So if something looks like something, it probably treats that. So the canker on the tree looks like a cancer. So they would cut that off and would make it to a tea and drink it, and it would cure cancer. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was this Russian author that got the Nobel Prize for Literature when he wrote his Gulag series. But when he was in the Gulag himself, he got cancer, and he treated his cancer in his book Cancer Ward using chaga. So mushrooms have a huge. We don't really have enough time to go into everything, but this is just a real nice little brief, approach. Lion's mane.
Wow.
Have you heard of lion's mane?
I've heard of it, yes.
It's the most popular mushroom in North America today because of its ability to reduce stress, although it doesn't do it in the adaptogenic pathway through the pituitary. It does it directly in the brain by signaling receptors in the brain that work with serotonin. Okay.
Wow.
But it also has other types of terpenes in it that stimulate brain-derived nerve growth factor. So it helps with memory, and it helps with repair and damage. But historically, lion's mane was used for gastritis and for gastric cancer and for inflammatory bowel disease. It helps the bowel. So mushrooms have a wide variety. I mean, I'm keeping myself really busy talking
Wow.
about all this
Yeah.
stuff, and I could spend a whole lecture just talking about one mushroom, but I have to start by talking about them all and about what underlies mushrooms and why they are what they are and why they're good, why what they are is good. And then maybe next year, the year after that, I'll start focusing on single topics, that once everybody's gotten a baseline of understanding of mushrooms and how they work. I've also been working with using mushrooms together with cannabis. And for instance, when you look at the reishi and you look at the lion's mane for stress, when you take CBD, they all work together very well because they signal many of the same receptors that deal with serotonin and stress. I made a product for real mushrooms. It's a soft chew. We call it Relax Mushroom Chews, and it contains lion's mane and reishi extracts in a soft chew. But I also put tryptophan in there as a precursor for serotonin. I also put theanine in there, which is what gives green
Okay.
tea its zen. I also put uh, catnip, which is a great
Oh,
calming
interesting.
agent and good for the digestion. And cats like it because of that. Cats will eat it. And I also put valerian root, passion flower, lemon balm. I think that's and lemon balm. I think that was it. Yeah. And so some of the herbs, the tryptophan will be more immediately calming. The reishi and lion's mane, as I mentioned,
Hmm.
kind of need to be taken on an ongoing basis. So that's cool. The relaxed mushroom chews for them.
Now, are they vegan or they
They are
have
not. I'm sorry.
they are not? Okay, that's
It
so
is.
for our vegan listeners, just
Yeah.
be aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and let me speak to them. I'm a product formulator. I design products and I design soft chews as well. And the problem with soft chews is that soft chew matrix that you put all the goodies into and
Right.
making it palatable. And so I have not worked with companies either that have expertise in this, or I have not been able to gain that expertise myself to find how to put flavorants in there, palatants in there, and substances that create that solid matrix that are all vegan. It's very hard to do that. And in terms of sales and marketing, which is why companies spend the money to make these products and market them, um,
Sure.
the animal-based flavorants are much more palatable. Now we do have vegan flavors in animal flavors that can be used as well. So it is a challenge, and we have to look at how many people out there want them. But we also have many of these things in capsule form and
Yes.
powder form where we don't have all of those animal flavorants in it, for your vegan people.
And I recommend those all the time, and people love them. I have them in the house as well. I have them for myself as well as for
Mhm.
Moo. So yeah, so there are a lot of options that you guys have out there. So what should people look for? I mean, I know I'm excited about it, and this is so much incredible information. I'm sure people are saying, okay, I'm all into mushrooms. What should they look for when purchasing mushroom products?
Um, so that is actually an incredibly good question because currently, right now, in the mushroom product industry, there are two ways that companies are cultivating what they call mushrooms. One actually cultivates the mushroom, the fruiting body, the stalk, and the cap, and everything that you see. And historically, over hundreds, if not thousands of years, that is what people have used to either eat or take medicinally. But some companies are taking a shortcut, and what they're doing is they're growing
Mm.
their spores and their mycelium on grain, which is the first step in commercial mushroom cultivation. We myceliate the grain, and then we take that grain with the mycelium in it. We call that grain spawn, and then we put that on whatever the native substrate would be, which could be compost or leaf litter or dead or dying wood chips, things like that. And then the mycelium grows through the native substrate, and then when conditions are right, creates a mushroom. But when you just take the mycelium on grain and you dry it and powder it, you're not getting any mushroom. And measurements that we've taken of these products to measure their beta glucans, because the beta glucans are really the major marker compound common to all mushrooms, which is what gives them their immune potency. Beta glucans also help reduce cholesterol levels, by the way, and have some other benefits as well. So
Oh,
beta glucans are very important to the activity of mushrooms. When we measure the difference between beta glucans in a mushroom product versus a mycelium on grain product, it's about 5 times higher in the mushroom. So I did a study where I purchased 10 pet products off the internet that were labeled for pets that said they contained turkey tail mushroom. They might have contained other mushrooms as well, but they contained turkey tail. And turkey tail's gotten a lot of prominence because of 2 studies that were published using turkey tail to treat hemangiosarcoma, cancer of the spleen in dogs, and relatively successfully. There were some positive findings from those studies. But what I did was when we got the products in, we covered up the labels so nobody knew what was what, put numbers on them, and we sent them off to a third-party lab that is expert in analyzing for beta glucans, but also for digestible starch. Mushrooms, the mushroom cap and everything, high in protein, high in fiber, low in starchy digestible carbohydrates, but the other high in non-digestible carbohydrates, but low in the digestible ones. Grain, on the other hand, high in digestible carbohydrates, low in beta glucans, low in, relatively low in fiber, even whole grains, lower, So we, out of 10 products that we pulled, 6 of them were made from mycelium on grain. Some of them were labeled as mushrooms. Some of them, the companies will actually label them and say it's mycelium, myceliated biomass, or they'll say what the grain is, so milo or rye or millet or oats or rice, and they're not very large amounts of grain, but I know some people are trying to avoid grain with their dogs. Sometimes even a small amount of grain could precipitate an allergic reaction or an overload of carbohydrates. So we think it's important that the pet parent know that there is a difference, and that there are some very prominent mushroom advocates out there who have companies where they're actually selling mycelium on grain, not mushrooms at all, and they're claiming that it's as good as a mushroom, which I beg to differ. So real mushrooms, we call it real mushrooms because they are real mushrooms in there. And we don't sell mycelium, we don't sell grain, there's no fillers. I think there's a few, there were 4 products that were mushrooms. 2 of them were from real mushrooms. 2 of them were companies that purchased the raw materials from real mushrooms parent company that cultivates these mushrooms organically. So I think you need to look at the label. You need to see if there's if it takes a little work. You need to see if there's a contact number, that you can call the company and say, can you give me a certificate of analysis? I want to see how much beta glucans, or how do you grow your mushrooms, that kind of stuff,
right.
And and go that way. Then again, and Real Mushrooms is sponsoring this podcast, you're safe to buy real mushrooms because it is nothing but a real
Right.
mushroom. And we
And
standardize.
and I will say that, and
Absolutely.
when you say sponsoring, I definitely want people to know that I receive no money and
Yeah,
no
yeah, I
product,
read it that way.
and I only I recommend it for one reason, and that's because I did the research and found that it was the product that I was comfortable recommending to my clients, for them and for their dogs. So when I come upon something like that, I just like to spread the word. Um, and yeah, I mean, people can go out and they can do their own research, but you can really avoid all of that by just going to Real Mushrooms and getting the products. And one of the things I loved is that it lists the standardized beta glucans right on the label.
Mhm.
you
And
know.
that's what I was going to say is that we do standardize the products to their beta glucan content. So one, that means that you can be certain that the bottle you bought last year that worked will have the same content and potency, if not higher, than as the bottle you bought this year. Plus, I've developed a way of dosing mushrooms based on their beta glucan content. So we take the beta glucan content and we multiply that by a certain factor and the body weight in pounds or kilograms, and then we decide what kind of how severe the problem is. So for wellness, we might use a lower dosage. I'm recommending about 1 to 1.5 milligrams per pound of body weight per day. So for instance, the cordyceps capsules. Cordyceps is 25% beta glucans, 300 milligrams in the pet-sized capsule. So that would be what, 75 milligrams of beta glucans. So, and then if you've got a dog with a serious problem, let's say it's got allergies and you want to use the antihistamine properties, then you'd probably go like 2 to 3 mg per pound daily of the beta glucan content. And if you have a pet with cancer or a serious viral illness, then you might even want to give it as high as 20 or 30 mgs per kg, or 10 or
Per
15
pound,
mgs
yeah.
per pound. And just doing some
Right.
quick math here to make it easier for the
Yeah.
pet parents who aren't in the metric system, like most aren't. Yeah. And so yeah, so the more severe the problem, the higher the beta glucan that we're going to give them. So that also helps in
Interesting.
terms of giving. Now all the pet labeled products, I put a general dosing recommendation of like a capsule for every 20 to 40 pounds of body weight, or a quarter teaspoon for every, that sort of thing,
Right.
which can be helpful. And mushrooms aren't drugs, and some pet parents are kind of very granular about those details, and I try to explain to them it's not that important. Just kind of get a ballpark
Right.
in there about how much they need, and they'll do fine. It's really the long-term application of those that help so much.
This is so informative and interesting. So another question is, are there any cautions that people need to be aware of when they're giving their dog
Well,
medicinal mushrooms?
mushrooms are food. And I mean, the
Right.
woody mushrooms are too woody to eat, but apparently you can eat them when they're very young. They're a little bit soft. You have to boil the heck out of them. Um, but basically, no. Now, there always are concerns about animals or people that are on anticoagulant therapy. And that's probably, when we go to literature, that's where we see the biggest cautions, but we don't really have any actual case reports of problems
Mm.
with it. So we're really just being cautious. If you're on a lot of very critical drugs that are very critical to your health, then be careful. If your animal's on a lot of drugs that are critical to their health, be careful. But my suggestion with anything is to start low. Start with a lower dosage. Start with the wellness dosage. Just start with a mg per pound per day. Get your animal used to it. Because some animals, no matter how safe the mushroom is, can still have a reaction. We do see occasional diarrhea, and there could be an occasional allergic response. Shiitake is a big offender for that when it comes to an allergic response. And we've got shiitake in our 5 defenders, which is a blend of 5 mushrooms, including reishi and chaga. So we recommend it for seasonal allergies, but it also has the turkey tail as for cancer, maitake as for cancer and metabolic issues, and shiitake for cancer and metabolic issues. So a lot of
Mm.
information, a lot more, a lot more than I can convey in a single
Right.
podcast. If your listeners like this information, I'm more than happy to come back and go to the next place, talk about the next thing too.
Well, I think that is a great idea. I think that we've covered mushrooms in a lot of detail, and I've learned more than I ever knew about
Oh,
medicinal
cool.
mushrooms before. And I always want to be clear that you're not, and I'm not telling people to go out and forage their own mushrooms. That's
No,
when you get
definitely
into
not. That could
problems.
be dangerous. Yes.
Yes.
And that's the
Yes.
advantage of buying mushrooms from a company is we know what they are. We grow them. Um, Mushroom foraging is very popular these days, but we are seeing
Yes.
more and more mushroom poisonings as well. And so,
And
yeah,
like you said, that's what veterinarians probably are concerned about too.
yes, and rightfully
Yeah,
so. Hmm.
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
So we had touched on CBD, but you know what? I think that based on, respecting your time and all of the information that you've given to us today, and I know that you have other commitments, I think we should do another CBD episode just on CBD down the line, if that works for you.
no, I'd like that. I have my own website and I have my own CBD products, and I've made a couple of soft chew CBD products that also have mushrooms in them. So we can talk about those then, you know.
And I'm going to most definitely put the links to your websites and your
Okay,
Well-Pet Dispensary and everything at the bottom of this so people don't have to remember anything. Um,
good.
I'll put the links so that, yep, so that they absolutely know. But I think that we've given them so much information.
Mhm.
And I think that CBD, most likely with all of its intricacies, is enough to
Oh,
expand for a whole
it's
other,
just it's
yeah,
just as complicated, or
yeah.
or maybe the better word is I find it just as interesting, you know.
Yeah, list. So we'll wrap it up for now. And I
Okay.
just want to thank you so much, Dr. Silver. I know you are just such a busy person. Thank you for being on the podcast. And hopefully you'll agree to come back and do it again.
Well, Diana, I've been, like I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I did 4 yesterday, but this podcast is what I've been looking forward to all week.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I have too. And I will say you didn't disappoint. So you went
Yeah.
above and beyond.
Well, it's great
So
to meet you. I
everyone,
look forward to talking with you some more. Mhm.
yes, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I know that everyone here is going to be replaying this over and over. And also, just so you know, we'll be publishing an article that Dr. Silver was kind enough to have written on medicinal mushrooms for the Plant Powered Dog website. So you'll find that there. And I will post all the links for you guys. And thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Silver. And we'll talk to you later.
Okay, nice talking to you, Diana. You have a great